And last but not least, Albert, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. There's nowhere to go but down 14-3. They won the Super Bowl. They absolutely just steamrolled the Kansas City Chiefs. It wasn't even close.
Yep.
Great. I'll forever be grateful to the Philadelphia Eagles, the greatest reporter Super Bowl of all time. I finished half of my game story at halftime, and then you just sprinkle in little details in the third quarter, and then you and I were just palling around with the great Mitch album in the press box, and everything was great. It was
Yep.
just it was a sunny, beautiful day, even though you couldn't see the sun inside the Superdome. So
Right.
I don't really know. What do you say about this team? Because
Well, let
I
me ask you this. As an Eastern Pennsylvania native, how long will it take before people are getting fired on WIP? And I'm not saying the people who are on WIP are getting fired, that they're firing Eagles people. Like, how much would it
um
take this year? Like, is there any sort of honeymoon coming out of last year, and really the last 3 years?
I think it's brief, but I kind of had this moment where it all came together for me. It's brief, but it's necessary, and this is why it was so weird. It was like this moment of clarity this morning when I was pouring my coffee, and I was like, it all makes sense, right? That everyone in Philly always wants to fire the coach. Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are kind of known for moving on sooner than later.
Yeah.
And if you combine that with the fact that Howie Roseman's draft strategy, someone had this, I think, on the SB Nation site the other day, which was really well done. Most of the time, Howie is just drafting like the consensus highest rated player at the spot.
Mhm.
It's not like that, and I'm not
Like
saying that there
Jihad
isn't
Campbell falling to them in April.
Jalen Carter, Quinion Mitchell,
Yeah.
right? Cooper DeJean, like, and it's one of those things where it's like, and I'm not taking away from the genius of what he's done to build this roster and the aggression and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But what I am saying is it all works because you put a talented team together, and your
With
coaches
infrastructure and culture, which is why you can take risks with certain guys.
are constantly on notice, not only from ownership, but from the fan base. And so, okay, Doug Peterson, I got a great team here. You won a Super Bowl. Thanks. Next year's not so great. Year after that, you're out of here. Okay. Nick Sirianni, we love you. You're great. We got a great team here. You won the Super Bowl. Thanks. If this year's not great, then we're talking about getting you out of here because what they understand is it's so much cheaper and easier to turn over a coaching staff and to get fresh ideas and to get fresh takes on a good roster, and then you get multiple cracks at the apple. And I do think in a weird way, like, we view Philly as this chaotic state where it's just like win and pressure and all that stuff, but it almost works. Like, it flows like a river. It's like, okay, if you're not a good coach, you're almost always going to have a good roster because of the way that they draft. You're going to get replaced, and you're going to get replaced earlier than people might
That's
expect. But
interesting.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, it all is what I'm saying. Does it make sense?
No, that's
Like,
interesting. It's like, yeah, it is cheaper and it's easier to move on from a coach. There's no salary cap on coaches. Coaches don't make, even now, like what, a great quarterback does, certainly, or even, a core player at a premium position would. So, like, yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, and so there's always going to be pressure on the head coach. I do think that Nick deserves a little grace this year, especially after he
I agree.
showed
Yeah.
that he did it once. You know what I mean? Like, it's all right. We went to the Super Bowl, then we kind of hit a really rough back half of the year in 2023. And I was able to recover from that. And not only was he able to recover from it, he was able to assimilate like two pretty strong coordinators in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio into his program. So I do think, like, Nick, if you look at the job he's done, has bought himself a lot of rope. Like, I think people looked at this backwards and they said, like, oh, well, it's all the coordinators. It's all Kellen and Vic. It's like, do you know how hard it is to kind of bring, when you've got guys who have strong ideas, who've done it before, like, that sometimes can be harder to meld everything together than it is if you have two guys who are just kind of blank slates coming in and are new, who are going to be able to play out what your vision is, And I mean, I think Kellen would tell you this, like, Vic probably too, but Kellen, I know for sure, would tell you that Nick's ability to kind of bring the whole thing together
Yep.
and to allow for Kellen to put his stamp on the offense without disrupting the overall picture of the team was a huge credit to Nick and the job that he's done. Now, where can this team go this year? You lost a lot of people, but you still have a really good roster, I think is the best way to put it. And
Yeah.
Darius Slay's gone. He was a starting corner for a few years for you. Brandon Graham, I think from at that point of his career is more of like a locker room loss than what you're losing from him as a player. Josh Sweat and Milton Williams are both gone. Mekhi Becton's gone. They did like lose like a fair amount of people. Kenneth Gainwell is gone, which is an important depth piece behind Saquon Barkley. So it's not like this is like a it's not like they don't have questions, but they've done such a good job drafting. And I think one of the luxuries of being where they've been from a roster standpoint is they've been able to draft a year ahead. So they
Right.
see a hole coming a year ahead of time and they're able to get in front of it, which is how you were so ready for, Jason Kelsey's retirement with Cam Jurgens and even Landon Dickerson on the roster. It's just the machine is humming right now, And so I think it's hard to put like win the Super Bowl is the expectation on anybody. But based on like the NFC and like everything else, if they stay healthy, like is like they should be in the Final Four. Fair?
You're right. I think Final Four is it. You mentioned it too that the NFC just still doesn't have those heavyweights, and I think that the Eagles were so far ahead of the curve in terms of having this bruising offensive line and these big backs and these big wide receivers who are willing to block and this big old thick quarterback. And I think that they were just now everybody's globbing on and trying to recapture some of that a little bit. We saw that with all the drafting of the backs and the offensive linemen in the draft this year, but I think it's still you still have probably a thin little margin where you're still just a little that much better than everybody else.
Yep.
At what you're
Well,
majoring in.
and I go back to the line of scrimmage thing. This is like one of my biggest rules when it comes to predicting where teams are going to be. It's like when you've got the lines of scrimmage taken care of to the level the Eagles do, it's going to be hard to beat you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I just, I know like that's not something Shelby's going to clip and put online. Maybe he will now that I said it, but like, I mean, and I know people don't want to talk about it, but it's Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Lane Johnson, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. Nolan Smith coming on at the end of last year. Like when you're really good on the line of scrimmage, generally you're going to be in every game. And if you're good in other areas, you're probably going to win most of your games. And that's, I think, the simplest way to look at the Eagles and the way that they're built. And, I love how they keep going in on it. Like they've got, ostensibly two centers, right? In Jurgens obviously is their starter, and then Dickerson can play the position too. They draft Drew Kendall out of Boston College, Pete Kendall's kid. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
they keep feeding these positions, and like they trade for Kenyon Green as a reclamation project from Houston, the CJ Gardner Johnson deal. Like they keep feeding these positions, and I think back to like when the Giants were really good under Jerry Reese and they kept drafting defensive linemen. It's like that's the identity of your team. Keep feeding the identity of your team. So even if you lose one, that identity is going to exist. And so, like that's I think the long and short of it with the Eagles is like as long as they're that good in the lines of scrimmage, like everybody's going to have a problem playing them. And
Right.
the reality is now, they're in a spot now where they're good everywhere else too. Mitchell going into year two, DeJean going into year two, what you've got at the receiver position with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith already established. I don't know, man. Like this is like a 10-11 win team minimum. And again, like I even when we talked about the Chiefs, like you can't just say like, oh yeah, if they're not in the Super Bowl, it's a huge disappointment, even though to some degree, like, and we looked at it a little bit. It's interesting because I think we did look at that like with the Ravens and I think the Bills, right? Let me say you kind of like do get a little bit Super Bowl or bust with them because they haven't been there yet. And eventually you want to get there while you still have those quarterbacks in place. When you talk about the teams that have already won it and have been multiple times in the last few years, like the Chiefs and the Eagles, I think you do have to dial that back and say, okay, Final Four makes sense. You don't need to be in the Super Bowl every single year, but Final Four makes sense for those two teams. It's just a
I
bar for like whether or not fans should be like disappointed in their year.
Right. I mean, for me, my sneaky little thing, and we'll close with that, is that I think that if you're the Eagles, you really want to come out because promoting Kevin Patullo to OC was well deserved and earned. But Patullo is also so important for Nick in a lot of other aspects of
Yep.
how that engine runs. And so, if you're Nick, can you find that next guy? Can you find that new right hand man to help you be Nick and to be the fullest expression of Nick? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think you will, right?
Yeah.
But because I think that they really do have a great vibe on that staff. But just in order to kind of keep all the pieces together, I mean, it's great if Patullo rises and becomes that offensive coordinator that you're looking for. I think that's a big part of this big part of this offseason. I have no doubt that he will be.
Yep.
But that I think that to me is sort of like your
I'm
baseline of like
I'm fascinated to see where Kevin Patullo takes this because like he did get passed over twice, right? Like so Shane Steichen leaves, they go with Brian Johnson over Patullo. And then last year, maybe they didn't have as much of a choice, but they go and hire Kellen Moore from the outside. I think the lessons of going through that will probably help Kevin. And I do know this, like last year, he was sort of the point man as far as like, all right, here's what we were doing and working with Kellen to try to build an offense. And so I think all of that should benefit him, and that to me, I think that's probably the biggest question they have, right? Like is like, like the offensive scheme, the offensive play calling situation with now, what'll be their fourth coordinator on that side of the ball in 4 years.